the far end. And then strip says go take both sides for strip, and so that pulls out all the spaces on both sides. This will be useful because sometimes when you're tearing stuff apart, you'll find yourself getting extra spaces. Sometimes at the beginning, sometimes at the end. And it can be tab or new line. It's sort of white space that is kind of not visible, clear. That's what white space is. It's like if you were on a piece of paper, it's the white space. It's like X. Well, that's not white space, but right here, oh, that's white space. It's any character that doesn't cause printing to happen, if that makes any sense. It's any character where nothing would be printed. And there are characters like that. There's like even bell characters, but we don't use them very much. We can ask very conveniently, we can say, hey, does this line start with a particular string? And so, you know, line, does this is a question, going to return a true or a false. Does this line start with please? And the answer is true, it does start with please. Does this line start with a lowercase p? No, it does not. And so again, you use this in the context of if something, colon, some block of text, some block of code. So we can combine these things to tear stuff out. And so let's assume that what we want to do in this case is we want to take a from line. This is from an email format from a mailbox. And this has got the from with a space and the person's email, and then @ sign in the school they're from, and a space, and then the rest of the stuff like when this mail was sent. And this is a real mail message from this guy Stephen from the University of Cape Town in South Africa. And it's really Stephen, and this really is the first line of a file that you'll get to know pretty well by the rest of this course. Hi Stephen, we like you. You are the example in my class and have been for a long time. People actually who know Stephen have taken this class and they're like, Stephen, I saw your picture in the class. So if you're ever in Cape Town at the University of Cape Town, say hi to Stephen and tell him that you saw him in the class. But okay, that's neither here nor there. What I really want to do is I want to extract his school from this email line. Okay, so now eventually we will do things like the data will come from files, but this is still chapter 6. So this is the data we're going to search through. And so we can say, hey, let's go find the @ sign. Search up to this position and find the @ sign. So data.find @ sign. And give me back where that's at. That's in position 21. This is position 0. Then what we're going to do is we're going to look for the next space after the @ sign. So we're going to start at the @ sign and tell find to start here and look forward until it finds a space. So data.find, look for a space starting at the position of the @ sign, and then that'll be in position 31. So 31 is what we get in the space position. So now what we have is we have in two variables, we have position, the position of the @ sign and the position of the space after the @ sign. Now what we really want is this bit right here. So we have to go one beyond the @ sign, and we don't want the space. So we say, we're going to use slicing here, data sub at position +1 up to but not including the space. Ooh, smiley face, because we didn't have to say space -1 because that is up to but not including. And so we get that little bit right there. So we don't have to say -1 there because this is not actually included. The thing that's at the position of the space is not included. So that's already a little benefit for the up to but not including. And so when we print this variable out, host, we get exactly just the school that Stephen works at and probably went to, as a matter of fact. I don't know if he went there or not. So this is just kind of a note for non-Latin character sets. All programming languages from the 60s on tended to work in what we call the Latin character set, which is the United States and England and Europe, and lots of places use this ABC character set and the special characters. But it's really common to want to use different characters. And so if you're going from Python 2 to Python 3, and we'll talk about this a little later when it matters more, luckily we're in Python 3, and so one of the big things about Python 3 is that all the internal strings are Unicode. In Python 2, there was sort of some confusion as you went between strings. And this is just a little bit of code, and so I'm putting a in here, you know, some Asian characters, this is Korean actually, Asian characters into X, and then I say what kind of a thing this is, and that is a string. And then there's this Unicode, and this comes from Python 2. If it's a Unicode operation, it's still a string. Whereas in Python 2, if you put international characters into X, then it was a string, and then there was a separate kind of a constant called a Unicode constant, and it was a different type. And there was ways that you had to mess with these Unicode variables as you did things like read them from files and put them back into files and did other things. So it was much more difficult in Python 2, but we're doing in Python 3, and in Python 3 it natively understands non-Latin character sets, international Asian character sets, you know, Spanish, French character sets. And so this is a good thing for Python 3, and this is one of the real benefits of using Python 3. And as we start doing stuff where we're exchanging data with the outside world, this will come into play, and I'll have to show you how to use it. There was weird things that you had to do. It just makes a lot more sense in Python 3. Okay? So we've talked about strings. We learned about the string. We're converting it. We've done a whole bunch of stuff, and this is, again, you know, we're not yet doing anything super useful. We're learning sort of how to like slice and dice, even though we're sort of not making the meal yet. Up next, we're going to talk about files. We're going to read some data, and we're going to slice and dice and use all the things in the next chapter that we've learned up to this point. So see you in a bit. Hello, and welcome to Chapter 7. This is the chapter where it all really starts to pay off. We have been learning bits and pieces and doing little 2 lines, 3 lines, 4 lines of code to learn the basic building blocks of Python and learn some of the syntax and define lots of terms. But now we're actually going to start doing something. So if you look at what we've been doing so far, you know, we're inside this little computer, and you type up, you know, the Python says what next, and you give it its command, and it does something, and you do something else and does something, and you do this 3 or 4 times, unless you write a loop, and then it goes like, you know, 10, 20 times, and that's it. And then maybe we write a thing that reads something from our keyboard, gives us something back, and then we write something that prints something out, print a few things out, and so we've been pretty much using the keyboard, the screen, the CPU, and the memory. That's kind of where we've been living. And while it's important to talk to the keyboard and the screen, the real world is things like databases that live out here, files that live on our systems, and, you know, connecting to the network and reading data from the network. And so that's what we're starting to do right now, is we're starting to be able to work outside kind of our code and create things that are permanent. And so we're going to be talking, initially we're going to work on files. We'll later talk to databases and the network and other stuff, but for now we are talking about files. And so really kind of we're stepping out a little bit and reading things that are permanent and creating things that are permanent. The kinds of files that we're going to talk about mostly are text files, and you can think of these as a sequence of lines in a file that are easily read by Python. You've been making text files all along. Your, you know, hello.py, that file's a text file too. You're using a text editor to create that file. You put your Python commands in a file, you run those files, and that's what it is. And so a file can be thought of as a bunch of lines, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, a blank line here. That's possible. And but the reality is that these are actually just lines, and we have a special character called the new line that we'll talk about in a second. So to read a file, you have to call the open function. And open returns what we call a file handle. Open doesn't actually read the file. Open makes it possible so that you can read the file. So the parameters to open are, it takes one parameter that's required, which is the name of the file, another parameter that's optional, whether or not to read it or write it. If we're reading the file, it doesn't harm it. You can read it over and over. If you write it, it actually, if there's already data in that file, it truncates it and writes something. And we're not going to really write files, we're mostly going to read them. And so open sort of, you pass it in a file, it gives you back this file handle, and then you have a variable in which you store it. I often call it fhand to be mnemonic. Just you'll see my code. I use fhand all the time to indicate that that is a file handle. And so if we were to run this in